Hello and welcome to episode 98 of the Pos-cast with Rabbi Shmuel Posner and myself, Seth Hellman. Rabbi, how are we doing today?
Baruch Hashem, we are good. The day started off a sunny day, and then it got cloudy. It's like this the story of the Jewish people, but we know the sun's going to come back. And I'm particularly excited that we have with us my good friend Shalom Avraham, Steve Rosenberg, who has a bio that would take me 20 minutes to read, but the most important thing about him is he's my friend. Many, many years. And the last time we were in such a setting, it was in the basement of I forgot what it was, in Everett or Revere. Where was it?
Everett City Hall, 1980.
I can't hear him.
Can you hear me?
I can
Hello?
hear him.
You can hear? Okay, maybe I'll turn my sound up. Okay?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so probably be the basement of Everett City Hall, which is a community that rings it's part of the urban ring around Boston. That would be 1987.
Yeah.
One year after the greatest World Series in the history of Major League Baseball.
What? When the Mets beat the...
You know this guy's from Long Island.
my parents are New Yorkers, so I do happen to be a Mets fan. But yes, Rabbi, when the Mets beat the Red Sox in the World Series.
Yeah, there's no, outside of Long Island, there's no real Mets fans, so.
Well, I'm in New Hampshire, so.
Yalla, let's go.
Okay, so Steve, thank you very much for spending some time with us. Let our audience know who you are, what your connection to Chabad is, and then we'll talk about what you're doing presently and what's relevant for people to know.
Okay, yeah, I'm a local guy, Boston born and bred. Grew up here, lived in Israel a couple of different times, in Tel Aviv and Yerushalayim, 2 different points. And I've been a journalist for many decades. We're not going to put a year on when I started, but I have a long history of working in broadcast and print journalism. I ran a couple of TV stations, then shifted over to print journalism. I was a staff reporter at the Boston Globe for 15 years. Ran a Jewish paper prior to that in Boston, which is now defunct, the Jewish Advocate. And now, for the last 8 years, I've been the publisher and editor of the Jewish Journal of Greater Boston, which is the primary Jewish publication of New England. And how did I get into Chabad? Is that the question?
Yeah.
My connection to Chabad, I was living in Cambridge in the 1980s, and I was at a point where, I was professionally on my way. I was working in TV. I had hit a bunch of milestones, but then you start thinking about what's next, So I started to think, I knew a lot about Yiddishkeit. I grew up in a family a Yiddish-speaking family, so it wasn't a stretch for me to start looking for a shul or to learn a little bit. There was. So I went. I think I took a course at Harvard Hillel, and I wanted something more. I wanted the heavy stuff. I had a friend who was going and had met you, and he said, "Yeah, this guy's cool, and he knows all the heavy stuff. You want to learn anything, he's available." So I just dropped in and never left.
That's it. Never left.
No.
Tell them about our trip down to Crown Heights. This will blow people's minds. We have people here listening. Will hear that you were what we did. They'll say, "Wow, you're so lucky."
Yeah, I made several trips down to Crown Heights with you. I was making a transition. Like I said, I'll just get back to that. I wanted to I realized I had a career, but what's the next step? It seemed empty. I was going to Friday night to Shabbos at your house in your basement, and I saw, the family that I had was very much a family of faith and Yiddishkeit and big Jewish souls, and in a lot of ways we were first generation. My father was born in Europe, so we were. Uh, so, but we didn't have to. I didn't see this. I didn't see the celebration of Shabbat, even though I knew that it was only, 40 or 50 years before that all this was happening heavily in my family for hundreds of years. So I embraced it. I realized, it's time for me to take this on to actually start a family. So I started to think about getting married, even though, it was going to be a transition, because whenever you set a goal like that, it doesn't happen overnight. So I love coming and spending Shabbat at Chabad House in Kenmore Square. And you started talking about the Rebbe, and, as a street smart guy, I'm very, skeptical of charismatic leaders and organized religion in itself, because the organized religion that I grew up with was a business. So, I saw all religion as a business. But, I came to, if Rabbi Posner thinks that this is for me, I will check it out. And so I drove down. I had not, I had seen Hasidim in Israel, and I had experienced. I think I went to a wedding, a Hasidic wedding, in 1980 in Israel, but it had been a long time since I had been around Hasidim. So I was very curious, but also very, very skeptical, being the journalist I am, but it was something different. It was really something different. I can read a little of this. I wrote this in 1989, and this was published in the Jewish Advocate, which is no longer. This was published on November 2nd, 1989. So this is after Simchat Torah. We drove down. We started driving 10 o'clock at night from Boston.
Probably a little bit earlier.
Maybe a little earlier. We got there around 12:30. It says at 12:30 a.m. I guided my vehicle through the back streets of Brooklyn Crown Heights and pulled up to 770 Eastern Parkway, center of Chabad Lubavitch and home of the Rebbe. What I saw as I approached the old shul made me feel like an old country European Jew. Thousands of religious Jews crowded in front of the of the shul. Old and young men with long beards, black hats, and garbadines, conversing, some with families, some alone. The corner was alive in the early morning hours after the holiday, and in the background people talked excitedly. Others rushed through the crowd with purpose as music seeped from the doors and windows of the old building. I followed the rabbis through the crowd into the shul and through a myriad of corridors. Before we entered the sanctuary, we stopped at a sink to wash our hands. The washroom itself had a very ordinary quality about it. It was also a locker area. Some men glowed as they came into the room to wash their hands, while others methodically opened the lockers and removed large chains and locks protecting their taluses to fill in prayer books. For the outsider, it was no time to stand and gawk. It was no time to wonder about what kind of Judaism exists in this part of Brooklyn. No, that would come in a few short minutes. We pushed our way through another dark and narrow corridor, stopping in an area where light emerged. Hands reached from the lighted room and hoisted me up onto a row of bleachers. I regained my balance, fixing my eyes on the room. All at once, I felt a swirling, stirring sensation within my soul. The shul, the size of a small gymnasium, was filled end to end with thousands of Hasidim in black suits and black hats. The room was formatted into a quad with several blocks of bleachers lining the walls. Every inch of the room was filled with humanity, and more Hasidim were squeezing their way into the shul. In the center of the room, the Rebbe stood on a stage, pouring the kashal bracha to a seemingly endless line of men.
So let me just explain. So this is after Yontif. The Via Farbrengen started towards the end of Yontif. At the end of Yontif, which we extended, like with the Farbrengen, let's say we start at 6 o'clock, it would go to like 11, 12 o'clock. And the Rebbe would wash, and everybody would wash, make hamotzi. So it was like one long meal, even though nobody ate anything. You just had challah when you ate hamotzi, and that was the end of the meal. But you had like little cups to say l'chaim to the Rebbe, and then at the end, the Rebbe would bench with a cup of wine, which is, that's what he's many times do that with a cup of wine, bench. Then he wouldn't drink from the wine then because it was late at night. It was already after Yontif was towards the end of Yontif. So then we daven Ma'ariv, this really late Ma'ariv, and then after that, the Rebbe would make Havdalah, using that same cup of wine, make Havdalah, and he would drink most of the wine, and then the line would start, which is what Steve was talking about. The line would start, and people would have a plastic cup, and the Rebbe would pour a little bit into. If we were real professional, we would have a clip here to Kaishal Bracha, but people can look for it online. But we'll get better. And the Rebbe would pour a little wine into everybody's cup. And what they would do is, it would be a man standing there with either a bottle of wine or a pitcher with wine, and somebody on below would keep on filling it up and handing it, make sure he had a full bottle. And when the Rebbe's cup got low on wine, he would pour the wine into the cup. And the trick was to pour it not in one long thing, but to do it like that, like that, like that. So every time the wine that's going into the cup is less than what's in the cup, so it's the minority, it gets subsumed by the majority. So it's still an extension of the Havdalah that Rebbe made an hour, 2 or 3 before. You're still getting the same Kais Shel Bracha, the cup of blessing. And while the lines are, there's a whole system how the lines, there was a bunch of lines, and how they would filter in front of the Rebbe. There was actually people in the front of it that would control it. It was very informal, but it was very formalized. Everybody knew exactly what was going on. And in the meantime, while this line is coming by the Rebbe, all the other Chassidim around are singing songs, nigunim. And from time to time, so the Rebbe is like busy giving the l'chaim, and he looks at every person that walks by him. But once in a while, on occasion, especially after Simchas Torah, when they would sing a lively song, the Rebbe would encourage the singing. Sometimes with his hand, he'd wave his hand, or just nod his head, or sometimes he'd go with the cup, he would like encourage the singing. And at the same time, as encouraging singing with one hand, he may be pouring wine with the other hand as people walking by. And so everybody that's around would be just watching. So sing those that were singing songs. And this is what Steve, when we first came there, someone pulled us. We got pulled up onto a bleacher, a bench there, and we were able to watch the Rebbe and watch this whole scene going by. And this is what we did. We left Boston at like 8 o'clock, got to about 12:30. We stood there for like 2 hours watching the Rebbe, and then about 3 o'clock, we actually went by to get our own wine. Because once you leave your place, you're not going to get it back. So we got to keep an eye on the line, because you want to watch the Rebbe as long as you can, if you have a good spot, which we had. And then what you want to get online to get your wine, because that's what you're there for, have your moment with the Rebbe. And and we drove down special for that. And then we went to sleep that night and drove back the next morning. Yeah,
very powerful experience that I had not had before with Judaism.
Yeah, it was an incredible, and it would happen after every Yontif, after Rosh Hashanah, after Simchas Torah, after the last day of Pesach, and the second day of Shavuos. So there was a couple other times that we drove down from Boston, drove down for Kaishal Bracha. Each one of them is Akiva Lebowitz drove down once. Craig Lebowitz, brother of Michal and Chana Chaim, Howie Lebowitz. Anybody out there may know who these people are. Doesn't matter. We can throw out these names. We don't know. Steve, you know this. You throw something out, you have no idea who's going to see it. You put out your newspaper, who's reading it. You put something out on radio, television, whatever it is. Whoever sees it hears it. So, you never know. You get regards, I was listening, you mentioned this guy's name. That's why we do drop names on the Pos-cast on purpose. I got a message from Mrs. Marchette, Aviva Marchette. She sent me a picture next to the tombstone of the Baal Shem Tov.
Oh, wow.
Incredible. So she messaged me that she wanted to add a question about something, not important what the question was, but I said, you go into the Baal Shem Tov, make sure you daven for Mashiach. Like, everybody has their particular issues, but like, save the world. You're at the Baal Shem Tov.
She's in Zitomar?
Wherever the Baal Shem Tov is buried.
Ukraine.
In Ukraine, of course. She went to Baal Shem Tov and she was going to Uman.
Wow, heavy duty.
Yeah.
Be careful, there's a war over there.
Yeah. Some people they know how to walk between the bullets. And the war's over. It's over. All right. So you said you lived in Israel. When did you live in Israel?
So I went to college in Israel in 1980. I was at Tel Aviv University for 6 months. And then in 1991, I was going to make Aliyah. So I started in Yerushalayim for 6 months and had a visit from a very special person who eventually became my wife about 6 months later.
Wow.
So, and before I went, I should say this, you brought me to Crown Heights again. You said, you got to get a bracha from the Rebbe. You got to get $1. I have the dollar somewhere here on my desk, but it's a journalist's office, so it's a balagan. It takes me about a minute to find things. But yeah, so I went, and the Rebbe said, I told him I was going to move to Israel. He said, Israel is the safest place for a Jew. So I got a bracha from him and $2 or $3 or $4. And so I was there for 6 months, came back, and then got married maybe 4 months later.
So you've
that
done
was 33 years ago, 4 years ago. And you did the wedding.
I didn't do the wedding. You did the wedding. I just made sure you did it right. I always tell people this. I said Steve was the perfect groom under the chuppah. You know why? He was crying, literally. And I said, this guy's gonna have a great wedding. It's gonna be a great marriage. When you're laughing under the chuppah, you cry 10 years later because we weren't serious about it. When you're crying under the chuppah, then you laugh with your wife for the rest of your life because you're really invested in it. You realize the enormity of what you're doing. Anyway, yeah. So you've I know you've gone to Israel and you've done all kinds of interesting types of projects there.
Yeah. So I've been to Israel probably 45 times. And I wish there was birthright when I was going to college. So I went in 1980, and I had never experienced a community like that before. I had gone to college, and college was different. This was sort of a combination of kind of like a youth group, summer Jewish camp, and group of intellectual friends gathering every day at Tel Aviv University. It was just a fantastic experience. Plus, you add on living in Israel, which was a different period. It was a socialist country. Not everyone had a phone. That wasn't a given. And certainly almost no one had a car. It would take years to get a phone back then. Forget about a car, like I said. No one had any money, but it was somehow manageable. It was like 10 cents for a loaf of bread and a half gallon of milk or whatever. We somehow found a way to get by. And I just loved the community there. The people were very kind, and There was a lot of humility there. There was a lot of Ahavat Yisrael. There was a real nice balance, and this is all, you know, a decade and a half before social media and cell phones and anything like that. I think there was one TV channel, but nobody watched TV. I mean, the main thing was the radio. So telecommunications were minimal back then. People talked to each other. People got bored. People went out for a walk. And you talked to people. It was great. You know, people were very friendly and open, and they were very welcoming. And I just loved being in Israel, loved the community, and I kept going back because I couldn't experience that anywhere here. And I gradually started doing some journalism there, and I have always written about extremism, and it was natural to write about Islamic extremism, which was beginning to really grow in the late 80s, early 90s. And I started making films. My first film was it was actually in 91 when I was there. I made a film that was on PBS. And then since then, I made dozens of films specifically about Islamic fundamentalism.
And where did these films go?
They've been on everything from PBS to Fox News to CNN to Israeli channel 1, all the Israeli channels, 1, 2, 11, 12.
So you've been talking about Islamic extremism before anybody else thought it was a big deal. 1990, who was talking about that?
Yeah, yeah. It was right in the open. You know, as a journalist, you want to do the story no one else is doing. So you want to break a story, and it was right there. And I had good contacts. They were willing to talk to me. It was, by the way, it was on both sides. It was on the PLO side. It was also on Hamas. Everybody was willing. So, you know, my first piece was on collaborator killings or alleged collaborator killing, alleged collaborators who were being just summarily killed for allegedly talking to Israelis. That was on PBS. I shot that with my home consumer camera and also a semi-pro camera. I edited it in Israel, and I found a nice audience in America. And then since then, I started to go deeper, especially after Hamas became, you know, a militant theocracy and took over Gaza in 2006. I interviewed many mass murderers who are now who were in jail, who have been released, either traded for Gilad Shalit in 2011, or recently traded for the hostages that were taken October 7th.
How did you get to interview them?
They want to talk. Nobody wants to talk to them. So I have great connections in Israel. Probably better connections in Israel than sometimes in Boston. I've made dozens of these films. And I broke another story, which is recently people started to know about this organization called UNRWA. You've probably heard of it now, United Nations Relief and Works Agency. I started covering them about 20 years ago, and I got hold of their curriculum. And basically, you know, the more I understood what they were doing, the more I was shocked. America was funding them, was giving them billions over the years. It's been the number one funder. And they've been in, it's essentially a business. You know, they've been in business. They're the only organization for refugees, a specific refugee group in the world that's funded by the UN. And I started to look at their curriculum, and then I started to realize that their union was totally run by Hamas, and all their teachers were largely affiliated and pledged fealty to Hamas. Many of Hamas's leaders were originally UNRWA principals or leaders. They were drawing a paycheck from UNRWA during the day and talking about killing Jews at night. But they weren't just talking about killing Jews at night. They were preaching it during the day to the kids as well. So I've watched the progression of UNRWA, the merger of the two. UNRWA's really been a proxy of Hamas to the point where about 10 to 15 years ago, they started having these massive summer camps. And up until 2023, it had reached 100,000 kids. 100,000 kids in Gaza for 2-3 weeks at a time. They go every day to their summer camps where they were handed guns, live ammunition, knives, and taught how to kill, shoot, and stab and kidnap Israelis, civilians and soldiers. And at the end of the event, Hamas leaders would give them a big pep rally and everything. It was horrific. Child abuse, brainwashing. Unfortunately, the Israeli government didn't take it seriously. We passed all this stuff on. We kept pushing it to them. We did push it to America. And the first Trump administration cut the funding. He actually mentioned the videos in a press conference once. I was surprised, He did cut the funding, and Biden did cut it again, and I believe Trump has cut it again. So, but it's that's one of the bigger stories that I broke.
When you went into Gaza and you saw these summer camps and all this kind of stuff?
Well, it reached a point about 10 years ago where it was too dangerous to go to Gaza or even into the West Bank. I've been to Bethlehem and Shechem and where else? Ramallah, Jenin. I mean, I've been to these places a lot, too many times, many, many, many times. But now it's too dangerous to go. So we've hired Arab crews to do it. Unfortunately, the Arab crews they've had their equipment confiscated. The recordings have been confiscated. Some have been exiled. All of them have gone to jail. I mean, they talk about journalists, treating journalists fairly. There's none of that. I mean, on the other hand, in Gaza, Hamas is just, very open to sending this stuff to us. So they wanted to get the word out about it. So they didn't care. But Palestinian Authority, that's another thing. So yes, I've been to these places a lot, and some of the stuff that I've seen is just horrifying.
So this sounds very interesting. So you're an activist journalist.
I wouldn't say I'm an actor. I'm a straight journalist.
You're reporting on stuff that Hamas is doing 25 years ago.
Yeah. I think the issue here is it's a very complicated issue. Life is not black and white. I think a lot of people think that way, especially now. It's shades of gray. We know that. And the big problem, I think, is Israel didn't take it seriously. We passed all this stuff on to the Israeli government every time we did it, and they just, it wasn't it wasn't a priority for them. I think the Israeli population also didn't know anything about UNRWA. You asked them about it, they wouldn't know anything about it. They don't want. They have so many other things going on. Just getting through a day there, as you know, you have family there. Each day there is like a week in real life, it seems.
Now that you're up in the North Shore, and what is your goal with your newspaper? What are you trying to do
I think that
besides Machan Aleben?
that's the number one thing, as we know.
Means earn a living.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do all this stuff without getting a paycheck, right?
Right.
Uh, but I think the idea here, and I've done a lot of straight journalism. When I say straight, secular journalism, I was at the Globe for a long time. Um, the goal of a journalist is to give people a voice, to who wouldn't otherwise have a voice, to bring people to a new place, a new neighborhood, to transport them from their lazy chair at home to a place that they wouldn't ordinarily go to, and have them connect, have them feel. And it's the same now in running this Jewish paper. I like to bring people to places that they ordinarily wouldn't go to because of socioeconomic reasons. They wouldn't associate with a certain group of people, or a certain person they would never meet. And then they'd say, you know what, I feel something, I connect to this person, the whole thing is much bigger than I thought, for a moment. Life is a little bigger. My life is a little, has changed for a second. I like when people feel. When people feel, then they are open to connecting more with people. And I think that that's the biggest reason why I'm doing this, is so our readers, in this case it's Jews and interfaith families, can connect, feel, have a sense of unity, and also have an idea that, maybe I can, learn about a show, or maybe I need a rabbi, or maybe I can have a preschool for my kid, or send my kid to summer camp, or maybe, you know what, it's only a 25-minute ride to Logan Airport. I'm going to buy a ticket and go to Israel. So there's all kinds of opportunities to get involved in Yiddishkeit, and that's what I'm all about, is providing a palette for people to reach out, say, okay, this color is mine. I want to do this. I want to learn Torah. There's all kinds of opportunities, and that's what we want to do, is we want to unite the community that way and give people opportunities.
Amazing. That's fantastic. It's so uplifting.
It's heavily influenced by Chabad.
No, that's the whole idea, is to tickle people's neshama so they want to get moving.
Have a little neshama explosion to quote.
Yeah, I don't use the word explosion anymore because it'll trigger people. But Seth wasn't here during the neshama. That was every noon in the Chabad. That was the word. Have a neshama explosion, with your neshama's in there, and it explodes. It just it goes all over the place. So when your hands are putting on tefillin, and your head has tefillin on, and your mouth is eating kosher, that's the neshama explosion. People come in. That's what we do. We ignite neshamas, not explode in a negative way, in a positive way, giving goodness and kindness all over the place. And yet you do it. Yeah, that newspaper is incredible because people sit there and they read it. It's not like they're not listening. When you read something, you actually connect with much more than you watch something or you see it even on a screen even.
Yeah, and we try to be subversive also. I try to fill it up with more stuff than anyone could ever read. So there's a little something left over, maybe.
Yeah, I think you built the paper is much bigger than it used to be. Is it the same?
Yeah, and our goal, and we're talking about coming. Right now, we have 10,000 subscribers. We're talking about doubling it in the next year or two, and then tripling it, because right now, Jews need to be connected.
Right.
Jews need a voice. There's a vacuum here. And we need to be connected. We need to be unified. We need to have a platform to express ourselves and to break stories also that the secular press will not run. Like you and I discussed the MTA in the last couple of weeks, and you got me thinking. And I did some research on it, and I wrote a front page editorial that ran this past week, calling for this organization's union leaders to resign. Why would the largest union in New England, a group of 117,000 educators, focus its policy solely since October 7th, 2023, on Israel's behavior and also on creating anti-Semitic rhetoric? Why would they do that?
I think that putting that in the paper was like probably shocking to many people, because you don't usually paper has something really nice and rosy on the front, something about a community, about a shul, about people going to Israel, coming from Israel. And so when you put that like smack on the front page, like, I think really woke people up. So I think the point is to connect people, but also make them aware that there's stuff going on in the community. You have to know about this. You can't be, you have to be aware of the forces that are against us. But I like that idea of like connecting people and being people together. You know what the Rebbe would say to journalists? You should be able to break the biggest story of all. Mashiach is here.
Man, with that, thank you so much for listening to episode 98 of the Pos-cast. Rabbi Shmuel Posner. We will see you next week.